This is a simple naan recipe that works, and importantly works consistently. 250 grams strong white flour or traditional flour, 250 grams wholemeal brown flour, 2 teaspoons dry easy baking yeast, 1 teaspoon or about 5 to 10 grams of salt, a minimum of 3 tablespoons of olive oil. I then grab a wooden spoon and stir the olive oil into the flour. You end up with little lumps of olive oil, so I then use my fingers to massage the olive oil into the flour so you don't end up with the large lumps. I'm not sure how important this is, but I do it just to get the consistency. Next, 350 milliliters of tepid water. I use the kettle because it's an easy way of getting it up to a tepid temperature. Now pour the water into the flour and mix it with a wooden spoon. We'll then go on and knead the flour. And I'm just going to talk a bit more about this and the detail of why we do these things. I obtained this recipe from my brother, having tried several other recipes and failed spectacularly. Regarding the dough, he said, "I've seen some French bread makers online who talk about the importance of having really slack (brackets wet) dough and stretching it out and folding it back on itself, and that helps trap the air in the mix." Regarding kneading, Rulzion tells me I had a great day with Rami at the Blair Athol watermill in Perthshire in Scotland. You do not have to knead the bread vigorously. Gently move it about. This is enough to form the all-important gluten. The gluten is important in the dough as it helps to trap the gases given off by the yeast when the dough is left to rise. The size of these gas bubbles depends on the temperature of the dough during this rise process, and I'll just talk a bit more about that now. Rulzion told me how he discovered this. He says, "The rise in the fridge really came from my attempt to be able to make fresh bread each day. I thought I would make dough and immediately cut into portions and put it into plastic boxes or sealed bags and then into the deep freeze. This I did, but when I went to open the deep freeze a couple of days later, I found it full of risen bread dough. All the dough had at least doubled in size in the deep freeze. We noticed this dough had a particularly good texture and flavour, and hence the reason for continuing to put the dough in a cool space during the rise process, and that definitely makes a big difference to the mixture and the outcome." We're looking for the dough to rise to double its original size or more. This takes at least an hour. I often prepare the dough at midday for the evening meal, and on one occasion at breakfast for the evening meal. The resulting mixture produced superb naans. The risen dough is very wet, so I start by sprinkling lots of flour over the dough and using a flexible plastic spatula to push the flour down the sides before rolling the dough out onto a board. I then make it into a sausage shape and cut the dough into roughly 100-gram pieces, which I roll out ready for the very hot griddle, or in this case frying pan, as I use here. I put a knob of butter down first and the dough on top. I wait for 1 to 2 minutes before turning it over and repeating it for the other side. I'm looking for leopard spots ideally on the surface. I then stack them with a sheet of greaseproof paper between each into the oven. You can keep them in the low heat at around about 80 degrees, ready to be served with the meal. You can also freeze them successfully and pulling out a naan whenever you want one and putting it in the microwave. For me, this is the only naan recipe that's worked and easy to follow. I hope you think so too. Thank you to Rulzion, my brother, who gave me this recipe.